Hi, hello, and welcome everyone. There has been a lot of news and demand around my YouTube channel that it needs to happen in English for a wider reach and for easier understanding. And hence, I thought there is no better time leading into the 2023 World Cup that I would do a weekly episode on Mission 2023 India. Yes, I certainly believe that India's chance of defending the 2011 home World Cup is really high. Of course, within quotes, keeping some conditions in mind. I certainly believe that the game has come a long way since 2011 when Mahendra Singh Dhoni lifted the World Cup in India. There has been a lot more exposure for all the foreign cricketers, be it English cricketers, Australian cricketers, South African cricketers, New Zealanders. Everybody has come and played IPL and a lot of other bilateral series. Their understanding of Indian conditions has definitely grown by leaps and bounds. So what I thought I would cover on this first episode of India Mission 2023 is Indian grounds and dew. Yes, I had fleetingly mentioned about the dew factor being a massive factor in determining results for or against the Indian team, especially at home conditions. And I've got some data to support that and why it is more imperative to start games at 11:30. In fact, the question was asked to Rohit in a PC, and he did say that it is left to the broadcasters. However, the point of 11:30 start definitely makes sense. And I will just drive home the case a little bit around it, but this will largely center around some of the other intricacies involved for an Indian cricket team. The Indian cricket team is often the most criticized and also the team that's under the microscope the most because of a lot of reasons. Because of, I personally think it's because of how big the IPL has grown and how big Indian cricketers have grown because of that. However, the kind of difficulties that the Indian team can face and the kind of variables that is very hard to control on the field is something that needs to be brought about leading into this World Cup. I definitely do believe the Indian team, skill-wise and personnel-wise, have it all in them. In fact, there will be a lot of debate about which player to pick, what combination to play, so on and so forth. But to me, that is the last of the puzzles. The earlier puzzles that need to be solved, as I said first, is the dew. And I would illustrate on that depending on different venues, because different venues have different characteristics with respect to dew and conditions, how they massively change from day to night. I have some numbers with me, but before that, what I would like to talk about is the ever-changing landscape of a lot of these grounds. Remember, a lot of these Indian grounds, which are not new, if you, for example, take Ranchi, maybe a recent the ground at Thiruvananthapuram, Guwahati, Rajkot, Lucknow, Ahmedabad. All these grounds have been built lately, and definitely, and the people who built it had it in their mind that they need to have a wider space in order to be able to adjust boundaries depending on requirements. However, some of the older Indian grounds like Eden Gardens, Wankhede, Chepauk is being rebuilt with different stands, but all these grounds never had T20 in their vicinity when they built these stadiums. So we must keep that in mind and also have what factors that go in favor of these grounds and go against them as well. So for which I'd like to start off with a very important facet in terms of numbers. India's ODI home record ever since the 2019 World Cup finished is extremely impressive. India won series against every team that's traveled to India in this space, which is West Indies, Australia, England, South Africa, Sri Lanka, which recently concluded, and New Zealand is going to be on our shows very soon. As I'm shooting this video, New Zealand is taking on India in the first ODI. It will give us a very fair indication as to where the Indian team stands, because Sri Lanka, a lot of people believe we're not the favorites. However, India, I believe, are favorites heading into this particular World Cup. We need to keep T20 and ODIs completely separate when we talk about India's quality. India's quality is just phenomenal in this format. And Virat's return to form is no doubt an extremely important feature, because I certainly believe the ODI cricket engine room was missing, because there was not a lot of ODI cricket that was happening. It was either Test or T20 cricket, and Virat's run-making spree in the ODIs will definitely urge him on to make those runs. Anyway, that's for a separate day. But India's home record is 14-4, and India, which I'm trying to tell you, is 14 wins and 4 losses at home in this space, which is a 78 to 80% win record for India. And that's 14-4, and there have been 18 games played in this span of time for this record to happen. And remember, all these 18 ODI games have happened in a different venue every single time. Incredible. If you just have to compare this same spree with Australia or England, the venues are pretty stock standard. Australia plays in Melbourne. They play all their games, mostly all their test matches in 5-6 venues. The ODI venues are if not 3 or 4 more, so they know these venues like from the back of their hand, and it's a very, very critical feature because ever since the 2011 World Cup India lifted, there has been a theme. All teams have managed to win their home World Cups. India in 2011, 2015 Australia, and 2019 England. There is no rocket science to this. Knowing your conditions like the back of your palm is incredibly important. However, India in this regard is always going to be a bit shortchanged because of the number of venues we play these games in. And every single time you play in some of these venues, the wickets are going to be different. India does not have a stock standard test season, ODI season, T20 season, none of it. You don't know how the FTP is going to pan out, and sometimes that can be very, very hard from a team management and a player perspective in order to prepare and also know what's coming your way. And to take it one step further, those 4 losses that I mentioned, 14-4, have happened in Chennai, Mumbai, Pune, and Lucknow. I'd like to elaborate on each one of these wins. There is a theme between the Wankhede Stadium, Mumbai, and the Pune Stadium. Both these venues are extremely small. Pune comes with a slightly higher altitude. The ball travels. If I'm not wrong, that game was against England, where Ben Stokes went berserk, and it was a chase in the night. Likewise, Lucknow was a completely new venue. The first ODI, not a lot of teams have played, and also a second string Indian side, a completely new side was playing because the main side was playing elsewhere. And the other 2 losses came at Chennai and Mumbai. Chennai, again, while chasing on a slowish surface, Shimron Hetmeyer had a brilliant game and India lost that game. Now, there is a theme to all these things set around, right? It is all happening in the evening. Largely, India have batted first, have posted a score which they believe is par and par plus, and the dew and the conditions, a bit of chillness, the moisture catching in the air, the pitch gets slightly better. There is going to be a bit more moisture sucked by these dry surfaces. There is going to be dry heat in the daytime. The moisture gets sucked in. There is another rolling towards the evening. Once the twilight hits and the dew comes in, the ball gets creasy, and the rest is history. It's very, very difficult. I'm going to show you how the Kookaburra ball, when it goes into the dew, changes its entire texture. But maybe an illustration sometime later on a YouTube short video. But once this ball, right, every cricket ball has a bit of lacquer on it, which is the overall coating. It's like smooth silk on top, and when you pour water on that newish ball, it can literally be wiped out. But once this ball goes out of the ground or it hits the bat, there are going to be surfaces of this particular lacquer that's going to ease off, and when the water goes in there, the ball gets heavier. And there is a bit of lacquer on the seam, and as the seam wears out, there's going to be soft spots there, and the water is going to get accumulated, the ball gets heavy. And since these are 25 over and 25 over old balls, unlike those times where there was only one ball, remember in the 2011 World Cup, there was only one ball that was being used, and at the end of the 34th over, there used to be a replenished ball that was replaced because there were complaints from the batsmen that the ball cannot be sighted, it's going dark, and hence this formula was used. However, that changed into 2 new balls from both ends, and now the umpires are extremely reluctant to change these balls because of dew. The umpires need to be neutral and need to be seen as not owing favors to any team, so they are very reluctant, and hence this ball change is almost impossible, and it's taking the game out of context, which drives me back to my point of 11:30 start. And now, diving into the next segment on what sort of grounds India might play, they have played, and what are the challenges in each one of those venues. Now, taking into the recent context, like we're talking about the recent context, right? India will be playing some series against New Zealand, then they'll play Australia a bit later in the year. There are a few ODIs that India will play getting into this World Cup. However, India will not be repeating a lot of those venues. Probably Vizag will get another repeat venue. But India are playing on some of the new venues. A lot of people in some of the interior parts of the country where cricket is not a common feature, the international cricket hasn't been played there, would love to see India play there. But India will be taking on New Zealand at Raipur, which is a completely new venue. India hasn't played a lot of cricket there, if not nothing at all. There will be a new venue apart from these 18 games that India played in the previous cycle, which is Hyderabad, and then at Indore. India hasn't played anything there as well. So these are different venues, right? If you look at Hyderabad, one of the things about Hyderabad, which again will bring me to another layer of the game, Hyderabad can be a big venue, but at times it isn't. And there is a reason for that, which also cuts across all the other grounds in India. Already smaller grounds across India get even more smaller because of the sponsorship LED boards. If you remember the olden days in the 90s and the 2000s, India used to have these sponsorship boards which were largely made with vinyl sheets, and the ball will go and hit on them and there will be holes plugged away. But things have changed because one sponsorship hoarding will carry only one brand. However, LED boards mean that these sponsorship sequences can be timed, which is right. I mean, these things need to happen for the players and the game to grow. But what that's meant is that the LED boards require a certain amount of spacing. So let's just say there is a boundary perimeter of 70 meters around the ground, which could be the case at Hyderabad. There needs to be a 5-meter space behind the LED board for people to be able to operate the electronic systems behind the board. And there needs to be a space between the boundary skirting, the rope sort of a thing that is being put around, and the LED board, which can vary from 5 to 7 meters. Sometimes, if the groundsmen do believe they want to see more sixes, more entertainment, they bring in by 7 to 8 meters as well. Now imagine a 5-meter perimeter from a 70-meter boundary and another 7-meter on this side, that's 12 meters. So a ground which is capable of having a 70-meter boundary goes down to 58 meters depending upon the whims and fancies of that particular day. So this is quite a difficult scene, right? Like for example, let's take, I spoke about 11:30 start, and you've got a power combo team like Australia or in England who've got Moeen Ali, you've got Jos Buttler, you've got Tim David, you've got Marcus Stoinis, so on and so forth, who come to finish the games, and one of our spinners is bowling. And he bowls a really, really good ball, catches the bottom of the blade. And if it was a 70-meter boundary, the fielder would be laughing and taking the catch. And this just boils over his head and goes for a 6. Now, think for a moment the mindset of the particular spinner. He's gone for a 6 of a good ball. Now, he doesn't know whether he needs to repeat the same ball or he needs to react to the previous ball. If he repeats the same ball, the batter knows that he can get into a good position and hit the shot because he knows the boundaries are shorter, because his bottom edge cleared the boundary. Now the bowler is in a catch-22 situation. From having a 2011 World Cup, where largely Zahir Khan had a wonderful World Cup, but remember the semi-final, the quarter-final, all these games had spin choke through the middle and top of the order. India's innate strength has been its quality spinners. The quality of spin might not necessarily have deteriorated, but the way spin is being played and how conditions dictate the way spin is being bowled, an innate strength of India can sometimes get lost. And if you certainly believe, I certainly believe India can do this. We've got the batting arsenal. If there is a pitch that's going to hold, and if there is a pitch through the daytime, there's not any moisture in the air, there's no dew, the pitches will be a touch slow. And if the batsmen have got the ability, which I think certainly we do, to make a par plus score, and we've got some great spinning all-rounders who can bat against spin really well. Ravindra Jadeja, Akshar Patel, Washington Sundar. These are not just phenomenal spinners, but they can also play really well against spin and so on such surfaces, which can be challenging for some of the other teams. Now, thinking back and talking about all these venues, we are going to dive back to the 2011 World Cup. The 2011 World Cup was played across 6 different venues in India, and we're going to talk about some of the salient features of these grounds and how it has changed as well. So the games were played at Bangalore, Delhi, Chennai, Ahmedabad, Mohali and Wankhede. I'm going to divide them into 2 segments. Now the Ahmedabad stadium has been rebuilt, so I put Chennai, Ahmedabad and Mohali in the same bracket. Chennai is not as big as Mohali and Ahmedabad, but the surface, which is slowish, should contribute immensely in favor of the team because it is not easy. It is an ample sized field to not be cleared when the surface is slow. So Chennai has got a slowish surface going for it. The chance of dew was not there in the 2011 World Cup, but the chance of dew has increased considerably ever since those eastern stands have been built. The eastern stands, previously Chennai didn't have those eastern stands with gaps in between for the breeze to flow through. That sea breeze coming through has brought in a lot of moisture and ensured that there has been a lot more dew than Chennai has ever seen before. And mind you, this World Cup is happening in the months of October and November, so we can expect that there will be a lot of dew. The outfield pace, the pace at which the ball travels, is also going to be an important factor, and Chennai's outfield pace is very reasonable. For example, an edge of a spinner that goes fine off the keeper will be tracked down in Chennai by a short third-man fielder later. I mean, he can chase the ball and stop it easily, while in some of the other grounds that might not be possible. Now, looking at Ahmedabad, the surface can range from having steep bounce to a bit of seam to a bit of spin. It can be a very tricky surface, but India has largely done very, very well at Ahmedabad because Indian batting can counter such surfaces with a lot more finesse and a lot more skill than any of the other batting lineups around the world. Because largely, most of these batting lineups around the world have developed into a sort of a power batting unit, whereas India retains its skill. Comparisons with world hockey and the current stature of Indian cricket is pretty similar. Indian hockey was very skilled. They used to have a lot of wonderful hand-eye coordination. Once the surfaces went into the AstroTurf, things and equations changed. And hence, there is a food for thought there. India's strength of spin and combating spin is again going to be a very, very important factor. Ahmedabad has been a successful venue, has got strong long pockets on the side. Straight boundaries can be smaller, but however, there is enough space to even increase the boundary length on the straight side at Ahmedabad. So that's a very, very good venue. The optimal pace of the outfield is still reasonable. It's not going to fly across the field. The ball can be tracked down and chased down by fielders, which is another important factor. Mohali is the next venue on my bucket list. It's a very, very good defending ground, even on occasions when there is dew. Like even in the IPL and all that, the dew can get exceedingly high post 8:30 p.m. But the ground is really long on the sides. It's a skiddish, sort of a good batting surface, which can make sure that death hitting might not necessarily be easy. And it is a venue, mind you, India defended a score against Pakistan. It was a touch slow. India had a beautiful spin choke. Zach bowled beautifully, Munaf bowled beautifully, Ashish bowled beautifully. So it was a great venue for India, and it's always been a successful venue for India. And it's got long pockets. The outfield pace is one thing that might be a little different to Chennai and Ahmedabad. It is a rocket-paced outfield. It is tough to track down edges, so that's something that needs to be kept in mind. The next set of grounds are Delhi, Wankhede and Bangalore. I put them all in the same bracket because all these venues have incredibly small outfields. In fact, Bangalore is where I will start. India had a couple of games at Bangalore. There was a 330 score posted, and it was a tight game against England. The chase panned out the way England wanted, with Andrew Strauss taking it on because there was dew, and this particular ground has the ability to actually enable teams to score really heavy at the back half of the game. Remember the game against Ireland for England, where Kevin O'Brien tonked England and won a very famous game at Bangalore. That was also at Bangalore. So sometimes conditions can be very lopsided. And Bangalore has a really short boundary on the other side of the dressing room, which is almost impossible to track down. The pace of the Bangalore outfield is rocket paced, which might not necessarily be very suitable if you're trying to defend scores. But on the other hand, the Bangalore surface has changed incredibly since 2011 because they laid a new drainage system which ensured that a lot of this underneath moisture got sucked away, and hence the surface got drier and started to spin a little bit more. And it has not been one of those venues where spinners have found it really tough. Ever since the 2012-13 times, the spinners have actually held their own in this particular venue. Chahal has done very well. Amit Mishra has had some good spells. It is not such a bad venue to bowl spin. So Bangalore is a bit of a tick in for me because of that particular factor. I'm not saying which is a tick in and which is a tick out, but I'm just presenting the case, and it's up to you guys, as always, to leave your comments on the comment section. Delhi and Wankhede, Mumbai, like Mohali and Bangalore, have a rocket-paced outfield. Very tough to chase balls down here. Delhi and Wankhede, though, have a little bit of a difference in terms of the size, not in terms of the size of the outfield, but the surface nature. Delhi is almost a skiddy surface. It's a very flat deck, not very easy to chase, not very easy to defend scores. At the same time, it's a rocket-paced outfield, and it's a very small and a tiny ground. In fact, across around the ground, if the pitch is on the center, it might not exceed 60 to 63 meter boundaries with all these LED boards, even shorter in some places. Wankhede is a reasonable sized outfield, to be honest, but the problem with Wankhede, though, is the red soil surface. The red soil surface has steep bounce, and hence some of your mishits, top edges, bottom edges, all of them carry the distance. With bounce, the ball tends to travel. Only if it's a reasonable sized boundary will these top edges and inside edges and bottom edges carry to the fielder and not carry over them. Mind you, some of these grounds, like I always suggested, were not built for the 2020 era. So the modern stadiums and the modern grounds are big, but do India get enough games in a particular venue to be able to know exactly what happens at different times of the year? That's the biggest challenge. India is an extremely skilled side, very skillful, can handle things, can handle variables on a given day, on how the surface is slow or how it's seaming around. They've got all the ability, But conditions, mind you, my coach W. Raman, when I started playing first class cricket, told this to me, and I hold it very dearly. There is no point in heading in a direction and going lockerheads with conditions, because conditions cannot be challenged. You need to learn the conditions and adapt. I think the Indian team, in terms of experience and skill, have enough in their arsenal to be able to do that. However, on a given day, if these conditions of dew, boundary sizes, things going here and there cannot be controlled, and that's the only thing I believe India need to be wary of going into this World Cup. If they get the right conditions of cricket being competed with skill to skill, this is a team that will be very, very tough to beat. And that's my thought on the first episode of Mission 2023. Do leave your opinions on the comment section and what you think about the Indian grounds, the sizes, dew, starting timing, what you think is the right option for India. However, there is a lot of people that need to put work behind the doors in terms of broadcasting, in terms of scheduling. But I certainly believe ICC should give it a thought to have a dew-free 2023 50 over World Cup. Thank you so much for joining me on today's episode.